This is the Manufacturing Automation Podcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Matt. In this podcast, we're going to discuss growing companies, automation and manufacturing,
and how we're building the lives and businesses we want to see in the world. Cool. How's your week been?
It's been good. It's been another week of sales and HubSpot migration. We've gone through, so we have 1,900 and some change for leads in our HubSpot account. So it was auditing that all week, going through, sending lots of emails with existing people in there, and then just making sure that they're in the proper tracks because we have so many verticals. And so make sure people that are wanting automation from us aren't getting embedded hardware email educational content, because I think that'd be a good way to lose some leads.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a lot of it. And then sales proposals. I was a little late to this call because I definitely got hung up on a massive proposal we're working on. And I was in the HMI phase of it, which I was really excited to see how much the team customized our HMI stuff for a proposal, which I think is a good segue of what I've been seeing you guys working on this week on your HMI. I was really excited to see what you're doing too.
Yeah, that's probably a week delayed because all the posts are scheduled.
Okay.
Yeah, the HMI stuff was like mostly last week. Yeah, we just basically make PowerPoints of it and then try to build it for real in the HMI software. That's kind of how we approach it.
Yeah, that's a great way. We tend to sketch them out. So take like graph paper, note cards, we'll sketch out what they kind of look like and then build it from there. So kind of same concept.
Cool. So yeah, mostly HubSpot and getting all that settled in.
That was 80% of my week. I mean, I went through almost all of our leads or had some point of like, all right, which of these people do I remember talking to, making sure that those notes still exist, because there's always that big concern that you lose some data. There's a lot of value in your leads. And then oddly enough, Nimble, our old CRM, renews on the 5th. So it's like, all right, we have a hard cut deadline that, we don't want to pay the $1,000 to renew it again. So everything's got to be out and migrated by that date.
Yep. Sounds fun.
The fun part's over. So it's all good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you starting to do like email newsletters or anything?
That's what we're really pushing towards, because we've been creating so much educational content. Like we're releasing a blogger knowledge base a week now that covers some level of explaining what robots are, how to do ROI calculations, stuff like that. And so making sure that people have access to that through a drip campaign. We don't want to just be the drip campaign that says come buy from us because we're the best or something. That's just always annoying, and I always unsubscribe because those are they just get annoying.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, is that something you do as drip campaigns?
So the marketing stuff has kind of been my responsibility, and it's one of those things. I think I've said this before, where I'll do something for a couple of weeks and I'm really good at it, and then something else falls through, and then I just play this continual game of whack-a-mole. And part of it has been that our documentation and has not been there. The products have been so new. It's been difficult to find, a journalist or even pull away one of our existing people because we've been split between servicing our customers and doing the R&D. Where's my... Sorry, my phone is ringing. I don't even know where it is.
No problem.
Scam.
Yeah, they're going to keep coming for the next couple weeks here.
The minute you put your phone number out on... a website with any amount of traffic, it's just, you'll regret it for the rest of your days.
Sure.
But yeah, like newsletters, we're supposed to do one a week, and I've been really behind on doing it. I know they drive traffic, I know they drive sales, but then I, jump around to other priorities. And it's one of those things where I think eventually we need to really get a full-time person in that role that can kill it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a solid idea.
Yeah.
It is a full-time job. I mean, I think of Sean on our team. He's constantly posting our stuff for LinkedIn. He's writing that one piece a week and making sure that it's ready to go out. Currently, we're just putting it on our website. So then we'll be adding another couple hours of work just to build that email to make sure it goes out to the right people. So yeah, probably getting close to the point where you're gonna need a full-time person, Michael.
Yeah, and I've had full-time people there, but I've just never been satisfied with them. And to be fair, they've always been, remote, or I've made them half my assistant or something. And, probably need to just, commit, because when we did that with sales and some other roles, it really freed me up.
Yeah, that's the key, is looking at how you can free up your time. I think you've got the right perspective there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But this week I've mostly been working on new product developments, and of course I kind of can't help myself. It's been like an event week or event couple weeks. So we did the Haas automation event, which was really good. Just a couple of days. It was Haas Anaheim. They showed kind of all their little automation solutions, and Haas is coming out with tons and tons and tons of product. Some American, some not. And that was a really cool event. And then we did a track event, which I didn't actually go to that one, but I kind of got the word it was a little bit of a ghost town. So,
what do you mean by a track event?
Well, like ProtoTrack, the company. So they had another.
Oh, ProtoTrack. I was like, your team just goes and runs around the high school track.
Yeah. They just go down the railroad with you don't need a cobot signs.
That'd be great.
Yeah. But I made the mistake, honestly, of going to like the first event, where I think I probably shouldn't have, these kind of like local events. But when I was driving there, I had this kind of epiphany of like, I think I mentioned this last week, because that event was right before the podcast last week, that, I should really simplify the pallet loading thing, or like the Aroa RZ Theta, pallet style, pallet changing robot thing into something more similar to the conveyor loading system. Well, that idea, then I pulled another level back and said, well, what if you didn't need, kind of any integrations or PLCs at all? What if you could do in-machine automation pallet loading? And part of the reason I'm even talking about this is because I'm so far behind releasing the podcast. It'll come out in like a month. Basically, I spent 2 or 3 days just prototyping this thing that lives inside of our UMC 500. And it's like a swing arm, so it swings down. And then we have like shelves like you'd see in a pallet system, but they're inside the machine travel. So for, like 20 grand, we're going to get like 12, 15 full-size pallets. And all of it's macro-based. Yeah.
That's going to be huge.
Yeah. And the reason I say, I can't talk about it publicly right now is because we got to get on top of all the patent stuff. So that'll definitely get handled within the next month or so.
Okay. Got it.
But
that sounds
like
fun.
It is one of those things, like, how has no one done this before, right? How has no one just on like the kinematic XYZ moving head slapped on a second actuator? We have a rotary actuator. It's going to become a linear actuator. And, a little gripper that, grips the pallets and loads them. And I honestly just have no idea why no one has done this.
That's some of the products, though. I mean, it's amazing, some of the patents, like you go to get out there and you're like, I can't believe this doesn't exist. Or you send it to your attorney, like, can you just do a background check? Because I'm not finding anything, and I don't believe it. I feel like I'm just not a good enough Googler today. Can you just check my Google ability? And they're like, no, that nothing exists. Let's file this thing. It's like, what the heck? But that's a good one, Michael. That's a good find. But
we had these. I go through these like little mini projects, and probably a year and a half ago, we made a bunch of these Aroa pallets because I was too cheap to buy the little $300, $400 pallets. From huge mistake. But anyways, we had a dozen Aroa pallets, and we just kind of loaded them up. And I went through like 4 or 5 design revs to get this thing operational. And now it's just programming the macros, and like this thing's even easier to program to run automated part after part after part than pretty much anything else we built, because we're just loading a pallet and then G65ing out the program.
Yeah, all your tolerances are taken care of for you.
Yeah. And now the UMC is definitely kind of a Frankenstein machine, because we had like the roof off, the sheet metal off. I
want to see pictures. You got to send. Can you send me some of these? Like,
oh yeah, I can send you a photo. Well, we got the conveyor loading system. We have our own custom auto door. We have light curtains on it. Now we have an internal pallet loading system that we can pull off. Like the shelves, like kind of slide off. Like they slide together like McDonald's Happy Meal box.
Okay, yeah.
And they pull off, and then you can use the conveyor. But I'm just like, I look at this thing and I'm like, how has no one done this? We're going to get right now the current iteration, which is going to be phased out literally in a week for the next version. We're getting 6 pallets, and the cost for us to build the system, without the 0 point and the rotor union and everything, it was like $6,000. And then when we go up to add the linear actuator, now we're going to get 12 or 15 pallets. And, I look at what's in the market now, like, Trinity has a 12 pallet system. It's $200,000, right? And like even the little Haas system will get you 9 pallets. It's a 4x4 thing and it's $100,000. It's just, it's one of those things where it was like I feel like a stroke of genius, and then the execution is the hard part, and that's what we've been working on.
Oh yeah. So are you going to have different sheet metal then on the side of the UMC that you're going to have to modify?
Well, so
then you
the shelf,
access all those shuttles?
So the shelf is like inside the UMC, right? Or on the like the inside right side of the sheet metal. And this is something that right now, just like the conveyor, is only going to be compatible with the UMC line from Haas and the DVF line from Doosan. Because those are the only, first off, the only kind of mid-tier brands that make up a huge amount of the business that we do. But they also have a very similar kind of overall layout. But yeah, we just bolt the shelves directly to the sheet metal. They're water jet kind of slide together pieces. And then, the shelving combined with the sheet metal is rigid enough. And then the harder part is modifying the casting on the actual head to, hold the actuator. And, we started with a rotary actuator. So the whole thing kind of swings around almost like a Datron probe, how it kind of swings down, right?
Yeah.
The same exact thing. And then we need to make it linear, because we realized if we make it linear, we can get, whatever the linear travel is of that stroke, we'll add that much essential Z height for the pallet loading. So, right now on the UMC, we have 14, 16 inches of Z stroke. But if we add a 20-inch linear actuator there, now we have 36 inches we can put pallets on.
But do you even could you sell, if somebody has access to 6, do you think that you'd sell that? Why not just finish that product and see what the market acceptance is?
Yeah, that's it's a good point. The kind of Rev 1, and to be fair, it's always one of those things of how much work do you put into it to get it to the point where you sell it, right? Maybe that's the right call.
Yeah, I just get you thinking about that, because I know how, being an engineer, how easy it is to tinker, continue to mission or feature creep, and it's like, do we have a product we can monetize right here and get customer feedback? And if that's the case, how can you go to market?
Yeah, and what's crazy to me is just there's so little to go wrong. I mean, it's an actuator and a gripper that kind of has the forks for the Aroa pallet, and it just loads into an Aroa base, and you can do it with System 3R or any of the other kind of 0-point systems. But to be able to build something like that over the course of a week and a half and have it working is just pretty rare. That's
incredible.
And yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So that's what I've been playing with.
Okay, nice.
And then we've been working on the Rev 4 conveyor kind of in parallel. Okay.
Yeah, that's where you're doing your PLC and the HMI pictures that I was seeing, right?
Yeah. So and we're kind of getting that to the point where we're going to be happy with the HMI, and then hopefully move on. But this conveyor is going to be a lot more solid, and I'm hoping that we have the first ones, the first kind of beta units out there in the next month or so, and then we kind of fully roll it out in Q1 of next year.
Okay, that's just around the corner. So
yeah, I know. it might be too optimistic of a timeline, but I'm sure going to try.
Yeah, I always like to say that December is always kind of like a lost month. By the time you look at December and that beginning week of January with the holidays or Thanksgiving there, it's like there's some serious loss of efficiencies there, where it's like this year we're starting to talk as a team like, all right, is this where we take those couple weeks and all we do is continuous improvements that we've wanted to get done to increase our efficiency as we go into the next year?
Right. Yeah, that's tough. And it always depends on if we get a surge of orders. There's always people trying to slip in their Section 179s at the end of the year, which can make things, a difficult sprint before that. We give everyone like a week long time off, which, is really 9 days. And then, of course, people use their PTO to essentially extend that, which makes the holidays hard.
Okay. What do you mean by, so you give 9 days for
Well,
just,
no, we give 5 days, but that's a 9-day stretch that no work is happening, right? Because you have the weekends on either side of it.
oh, I see what you're
So,
saying.
you know,
So you give off
whatever,
that full week of
mhm.
Christmas.
Yeah, wherever Christmas lands, and you know, if it's a Saturday or whatever, then we go the week prior, week after. And we give that 5-day stretch off, and then, you know, some amount of people are going to use 2 or 3 days PTO. So then, you know, it can be like a whole half month where, you know, you might have multiple employees not working.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay, that's definitely a challenge to work around.
Yeah.
I'm
And
curious
what
if
we've,
you'll keep that moving forward.
yeah. Everybody loves it, and I need it too, you know, which is we always go down to Colorado and do a little bit of a snowboarding adventure during that little stretch.
Okay, nice. It's good to unwind. So, where in Colorado do you go snowboarding then?
Well, last year we went to Aspen. Before
Okay.
that, we would usually go to Copper.
Okay, nice. I've never skied or snowboarded.
Ever?
Never. I've never done either one. Like, I've done water skiing, I've done wakeboarding, I've done kiteboarding,
Hmm.
I've done like all the warm weather ones, but I hate being cold, so I've like never gone out of my way to go skiing or snowboarding.
You don't get that cold. It's not too bad.
That's what I've heard. So
And I
definitely
hate
need
the
to do that
cold. I hate the
sometime.
bad weather. You know, I live in Los Angeles for a reason.
Yeah.
So I'm not a cold weather person at all, and I'm okay because you're moving around like crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
That
you don't have to
makes
go on the
sense.
coldest day of the year.
And maybe we'll have to figure out a way to meet up in Colorado one of these days and
Mhm.
go snowboarding. I'll have some broken limbs to talk about on that podcast following week.
Yep. You know, I actually used to ski, and I got such bad ankle problems that I
Oh,
eventually
really?
moved over to, yeah, because I sprained my ankle during COVID because I was in a little hiking group, and then it became like a thing where my, you know, ankle, you know, I kept not resting the amount I was supposed to be fair. So,
Yeah.
you know, I sprained my ankle like 5 times in a row. And then that got to the point where if I was on skis and I would go like 30 miles an hour, my left foot would just start shaking. And then, you know,
You get speed wobble in your ankle.
yeah. It's like the motorcycle death wobble, but on skis. And then, you know, all of a sudden
that's-
you're tumbling down a double black diamond, and
geez.
it's like, and that happens more than a couple of times. And you're like, okay, I need to stop this.
Yeah, that's a solid reason there. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Curious to hear more about snowboarding.
Well, anyways, other kind of back on topic.
Yeah.
I'm doing something a little bit weird, and I thought I'd sanity check it.
Okay.
You don't listen to a lot of the other podcasts, do you? Like the similar-ish machining ones?
No, I'm more like audiobooks is what I listen to. I've been getting into a couple podcasts lately, but I haven't listened to enough of them on repetition to say
Right.
which ones I could give any feedback on.
So that, you know, there's like business and machining and incremental, and those are kind of my and lean built. Those three are definitely my favorites. But you know, business and machining, they talk about, you know, this idea of like days off in the shop, right? Where they go and take days off to just try to make improvements, and kind of, it's almost of like, I'm not here, don't ask me questions, right? And I'm going to do what I want. And I've tried to do that for a while. You know, we had like Thursdays or Michael's R&D days, but then of course inevitably when someone had a question, and
You're still there.
with my ADHD brain, I go and now I'm solving a problem that somebody else is fire for 2 hours. So what I've decided to do, and this is kind of the first week I'm really doing it, is I'm intentionally taking a day off, which is going to normally be Fridays, but not this week. And then I'm going to take, you know, Saturday off. So my weekend's going to be Friday, Saturday, and then I'm going to work Sunday. And the idea is that, you know, I have my day off where I can do the R&D thing. Nobody bugs me. You know, maybe I have somebody who wants a little bit of overtime come in to help with the project or whatever, but then I can just focus in and work on, you know, either improvements or video content or some crazy R&D project. Because, you know, I think even last week I said I was going to work on the weekend, and you told me not to. and I did.
Well, you gave me
Yeah, I know, I
harassed
know.
me the time that I said I was going to, so I had to return the favor.
And it was well deserved, but I kind of thought, hey, what if I can make that, you know, almost systematic?
Yeah, I think that's Google has a theory on like 15% of time is what people should be focusing on, new products or improvements for the company, not just doing your day-to-day tasks. So basically that comes down to a little bit less than a day for you. Just round it up and call it a day. I think I'm curious to hear how it goes by doing it over the weekend like that. It might actually have some other impacts that you won't be anticipating because now the team's not going to have you on Fridays.
Right.
So you'll start seeing points where the team has constant questions that you were just falling into, and how do you educate them so they don't need you on that? So it might allow you to actually get more free time in the shop while you're there too, if that plays out. That's a theory. I'm curious to see how
Right.
that plays.
Yeah, and it's kind of a where's my time going too? Because if I'm there on Sunday and I'm making constant SOPs, absolutely. If I'm just doing the crazy R&D projects, I'm probably creating more chaos than
Yeah.
Obviously, the way to smooth out a business operation the most is just to do exactly the same thing over and over, which is kind of the exact opposite of our culture, which is
Oh,
yeah.
it doesn't work for our size of business. Everybody's got to have flexibility. But have you tried ever just auditing your time? Like take 1 to 3, 4 weeks and you just see where every 10, 15, 20 minutes goes and write that down and look at what can go off your plate.
I really should do some, like a time study or something on myself.
I have it like on my right screen. I'll do that at least a couple times a year. I've done that over the last, I'd say since 2020. And I just go through, all right, this is the period where I'm going to audit myself and I see where my time goes. And it is amazing to see how many things just have trickled in over your growth that can be very easily offloaded. Like
Right.
I can use
Like
one
editing a
example
podcast.
yeah, that would, I
Yep.
mean, but you'd have a solid number to it. So now it's like, all right, this is 4 hours of my time. Michael's time is worth X. Can we find somebody to do that for less than X?
Right.
I mean, simple one for me is getting like at the end of the month, there's always scanning in QuickBooks receipts. That's something I've just always done. I've never offloaded.
Right.
And it's like every time I look at it, it's like, oh, I'm just going to continue to do it. And it's like, all right, now I've got a mountain of receipts here, and I've been doing this for the last several years, and it turns into an hour-long task. Let's get somebody else to help with this.
Oh, for sure.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
just
offloaded that one a long
simple
time
thing.
ago.
Yeah, well, I'm just
Yeah.
using a simple example of one that's like, I don't know why I'm still doing it. Because I think probably because my virtual assistant that handles most of our accounting is in New York and I'm in Wisconsin. So
Right.
I'd have to mail her the receipts, which just always was like, this seems too inefficient. Where now we have a different PO process where somebody's using QuickBooks internally and now that person can do it.
Yeah.
So
And one thing too, I kind of joked last podcast that, if ever our companies simultaneously failed, we should get together. Because there's that whole visionary integrator idea and of, having one person that, kind of pie in the sky, always living in the future, and one person living in the present. I think you live a lot more in the present than I do, right? I feel like I live my in a good way, right?
yeah, no, I'd say that has been a bit of a mind shift for me because I will say I used to chase a lot of things or live too far in the future. And that was when I got that Merlin Advisors. That was one big thing they forced into me is the wrong way to put it. But they're like, Matt, you are your biggest enemy of scaling this business of where you want to be. Our number one goal, like they met outside of our meetings and like figured out what they wanted to get me to focus on. They're like, we need to keep you focused on just doubling this business a couple times here and rinse and repeat what you're doing and not letting you get distracted on some of these new ideas that you have or opportunities that come across your plate that just aren't going to be fruitful.
Right.
Or are too much of a distraction when there's so many opportunities in front of what you're doing in the day to day. So long story short is I've definitely chased like, all right, can I buy this business? What if we rolled out this new product? And it's like, we haven't saturated the market with what we're doing. We haven't. So hone in and focus on that has been my play for since we've really known each other.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing I'm bad at, right?
It's definitely a challenge or a mind shift, but I think you have goals that I think you could motivate yourself around on it, where it's like, all right, yeah, we want to make certain new products. It's fun. How do we make sure to saturate the market or stay focused on what does matter?
Yeah,
I'm not saying you're getting
I think
lost,
what's hard
but
for me too, like if I'm being really honest with myself, is that the goal isn't to make a ton of money out of the business. It's almost like my goal of growing the business is so I can go make new products, right? So I can go do something cool and innovative. And, it's almost like the money that's coming in from, servicing our clients and getting good results for them is really, my motivation to do that is to go make the next thing, rather than focusing on the current business. And, if I look through my kind of business history, like if I was just kind of really good at focusing on something that was working, I would probably be running a very successful, aerospace job shop, right? And because, we were a job, and it's just like when I'm out of my kind of, I'll use the cheesy term from the audiobooks, zone of genius. When I'm out of that area, I kind of struggle. And, what that kind of leads me to think as time has gone on is like, probably I shouldn't be the one, in the business operations seat. And it's like, at what timeline do I get out of that spot and become kind of the CEO, CTO guy?
Yeah, the operations one, I've definitely gone through on that math, and I kind of reached the point where it's like, all right, you need to be somewhere between 5 and 10 million, if not more, depending upon the industry you're in, to offload that operations person. At least that's where my math came out for our industry.
Yeah, and we tried it at around the $2 million mark, and it was just too difficult. And like the caliber of person you need to hire to really succeed there, that's a $200,000-$400,000 a year person to just, because they're not going to come in from the raw innate passion. They don't own the business, and that becomes a struggle.
Yeah, that's kind of what I ran into. Thankfully, our labor rates are a little bit less than what you see in California.
Yeah.
But even when I ran the math of like the several people I know that are operations managers and like what their expectations were to run a business like ours, yeah, you're looking well into the six figures. And it was just like, you need a lot of projects to justify that's all that person is doing.
I don't think it's 10 million, but I think it's 4. I think like that's where, yeah.
I said 5 to 10 is where my math landed.
Yeah. It seems a tad on the high side, but yeah, it's definitely a difficult spot. And, that's one of those things where I feel like I really need to get to that point so I can kind of, operate in the zone that I'm best at.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and to justify your, like you said, staying focused, you could go down the aerospace job shop realm, but if you get that business kicking off or running to the point where the operations is, your freedom in that future is going to get unloaded so much where all you'll have to, or not all you'll have to, is all you'll get to do then is create new products probably.
Yes and no. I mean, that's kind of one of those things, at least in the EOS nomenclature, is kind of the shiny object syndrome. And Good to Great kind of talks about that same idea a lot of like, oh, if I just do this one business really well, I'll move on to the next one. And at least where I've kind of found myself is like, man, starting a business is so hard if you're not really passionate about it. It just doesn't make sense, right?
Oh, see, I enjoy the starting businesses. I don't know why, but like
any business,
it is
though,
such a challenge.
Could you go in and start like a bath soap business or something industry adjacent?
That's a really good point. It has to be something that excites me. And so it'd have to be something industrial. It'd have to be manufacturing based. That's a really good point there. But yeah, I could see myself starting other businesses that are adjacent, so we could fuel what we're doing. But yeah, definitely not going to go start like a soap company. I guess I shouldn't say definitely.
Well, I guess
you never know.
Yeah, like the job shop business was the
someday.
soap company. Like it paid the bills. Like I could have grown and made more metaphorical soap. And I kept making decisions of like, no, we're going to totally change everything we're doing and totally upset this. And I took the one stepping stone of, okay, now we're an engineering firm. And then, that now we're an automation company. And I finally feel like I've landed in the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Automation is a total addiction because it is like product development because there's so many engineering challenges you're having to tackle. I guess I shouldn't say it's like, it is product development at the end of the day. So it's so many engineering challenges, cross collaboration. It's not just mechanical systems. It's everything under the sun for engineering. So it's definitely a blast. I agree with you there.
I talked about inventory systems a little bit last week. And you guys said you were on like basic Kanban or? I might
We
not
just
remember.
have we just have cards for some things. We don't do like the best inventory process yet. That's a CI, or a continuous improvement, for next year is really the goal. So early 2025, we want to go through and figure out better way to inventory our stuff. Otherwise, we're typically order to build is a lot of our
Yep.
stuff. And then we have miscellaneous pneumatics and electrical components that we do inventory, but it all fits in 100 square feet. It's not much inventory.
Yeah. So we moved to this system. I think I mentioned it, like Arta Cards. It's one of the incremental guys. It's $350 a month. But we built out what we thought would be a pretty robust Kanban system, and then they went and did the demo with me on the call, and I was like, wow, you built everything that we failed to build over a 6-month span in this nice little neat package. So we're going to start to implement that and see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about that, because we've definitely been following their social media, because they do some good Instagram posts around it. So it'd be nice to hear another real life person that I know using it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, what was cool too about actually talking to them was we talked a little bit about pricing, and they were very they know they're kind of early stages, and we're talking about what should our pricing be. And I was kind of reflecting, like, as we right now are raising our own prices, and I've kind of landed, hey, like the best company for us to service is, the company roughly 10 times our size right now, right? And that won't necessarily stay true as we grow, but, the going after the companies in the, $1 to $3 or $4 million size, like our own, is difficult because you still have some of that bootstrap mentality. And I was kind of talking back and forth with them, and they were asking about pricing, and I was thinking, I really hesitated to spend this $300 or $400 a month, and I think a lot of us in running a company of this size are afraid of a commitment like that, because we get burnt over and over by and it can be, I've been burnt at $10,000 a month, I've been burnt at $50 a month where the thing didn't do what I thought it would do. But I was thinking, like, okay, I hesitated to spend the $350 a month. Usually that's a sign that the pricing is kind of right, right? In that, you want to charge the customer essentially the most money that they'll tolerate paying, while still not being unhappy. And I realized that, I think they still are going to need to move up market, because I'm probably still too small to be their kind of quote unquote ideal client. But also it feels like the pricing structure is perfect for companies our size right now.
Which, is probably their target, because you're going to be the most willing to give them feedback if it's not working, where the companies that are larger are going to say, this just isn't working, we need something different.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. They're probably in a good stage to do that for the next year or so. Mm-hmm. And that's probably when you crank the knob.
It's interesting you bring that up, because we're going through on the HubSpot marketing platform. That's like $1,200 a month to do that, versus like the sales, which is where we started, was Sales Pro. And it's like that $1,200 is like, all right, when do we start paying $1,200 a month just for email automation?
So we have email automation, and you guys are moving to HubSpot at a different point, right? So, but we upgraded our plan fairly recently, and we're paying $450 a month for HubSpot. And I know we have, those automated touch points, and
so we have some of the automated. So you get like just the tip of the sales or the marketing platform with Sales Pro, and it's like this weird little bundle. And that we're paying, it'll be $200 and some a month. So I don't know how many seats you have. That probably determines some of it. How many salespeople you have in there?
Yeah, only a couple. That's CRMs are weird with the pricing, because I know companies that aren't bigger than us who are spending 10, 15 grand a month on it. And I know other companies who refuse to use the CRM at all, right? That are bigger
I still
scale.
know people in Excel. Yeah, I know people in Excel spreadsheets that are 5-10 times our size. I'm like, I have no idea how you manage all that. But that's where I know we'll go to it. It's just figuring out the timing. Our decision so far is, all right, we just migrated to HubSpot. They're trying to upsell us to the next thing. Let's become proficient with the tools we already committed to in month 1 of our kind of
I don't think
deployment
you need to upgrade.
of this.
That's my intuition.
Yeah.
There's so much there.
I'm saying reevaluate next year is the thought on the upgrade. So sometime Q1, Q2 is, if we're going to upgrade, we'll look at it then.
Yeah.
But yeah. that was our decision. So we reached the same conclusion. You just got there faster.
Well, and I didn't even make that call. We were on a much more basic version of HubSpot. And then when we brought on our sales guy, he was like, I really need something better than this. And then, that led to the upgrade. Because we were like a legacy customer, they kind of worked with us a little bit on the pricing after some of the, upgrade discovery calls that Gary went on. So, I don't know. We're probably on like what should be $1,000 plan, and we like haggled HubSpot down as a legacy customer on their old pricing model.
Okay, that makes sense. We'll have to see where it goes. Maybe we can haggle with them if we say no this time, and then they come back in 2 months. We'll be able to get that price down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did your new machine land yet, or is that still?
No, that got delayed till sometime in January is the update.
Wow, was that DN? Am I remembering that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So the Doosan or DN BVM 5700 is what we have coming. It was supposed to be installed by now. And then we found out actually the day that the electrician pulled the power and he was like loading the scissor lift, I got the call like,
oh my God.
I really hate to inform you, but your machine's going to be delayed. I mean, I get it. It's thankfully we weren't like dependent upon it, or at least aren't right now. So it's going to be just fine, but still a little bit of a bummer.
Like, 2-3 months is a big timeline.
Yeah, it makes you concerned about being able to get parts if stuff goes wrong in that first year too.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a concern. Something else go ahead.
Oh, I was saying Haas catches a lot of hate, but you can get a machine in a month. The last machine we bought, I mean, we actually got what we were told was one of the first 10 of the DC1. It was the very first one, but which we learned the hard way when we became the guinea pig a couple of times. But we signed the purchase order and exactly 4 weeks later on the dot they delivered, which I did not expect at all.
That's great. That's really good.
And their service can be difficult, but we can just get our sales guy on the phone and be like, come on, fix it. And then magically, the tech shows up after they broke something.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's when I helped set up Ring Brothers for their machine shop. That's all we had was Haas. I mean, the buying process was very nice. The service was good. It really just depends upon the business model you're in and what your expectations are out of the life of that machine, is really what it comes down to.
So speaking of that, what do you think the life of the DN is going to be? Is this a 5-year, a 10-year, a 15-year machine?
I'm basing it as 7 years. I'm going to depreciate that over 7 years is the way I'm going to look at it. And if I'm not having big maintenance bills past that, I'm going to be more than thrilled. But I've never owned a Doosan before, so I don't know what to set my expectations at. My theory is kind of base them like a Silverado or a vehicle at that point then. So 5 to 10 years is kind of that window you typically own a new truck. So
I think we talked a little bit about spindle utilization. I mean, you guys don't have crazy spindle utilization, do you? Like,
No, not right.
Is it 5%, 10%? Do you have a broad strokes idea?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you saying, so single shift, how much does it get utilized?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd say we're at 20% on the Datron right now. And I bet there's times where it swings past that. So it might be a little bit higher. But then there's also weeks where the machine pretty much just sits there because, we're doing other tasks within the company. So it definitely moves around, but that's been a constant, steady tick up. And over the last year, we had it where when we do need it, we need it a lot. And over the last year, we had a couple points where it's like, are we having some spindle problems here? Or, the spindle gets bumped and you're like, all right, is this the time it's going to go out? And we're looking at the schedule. It's like this machine slammed for the next month. Now, what do we do in that case? So I guess saying that, considering we had it overbooked for several months, we're probably closer to 30 to 40%.
And what happens with us too is, we have a lot of machines and they're all different. The water jet, the gantry mill, the VF2, the DC1, the UMC, and what we find is our overall utilization is like, 10%. If you look at the single shift or whatever, and then, one machine on a given turnkey or on a given part will have super high utilization over a certain time span.
Exactly.
But we also need all the machines to do the R&D because we don't have the right machine platform, and it's just what are you going to do? How do you test the thing?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's the Doosan's been part of that. It's like, all right, how do we get spindle redundancy, but then how do we get some access to some other things? Like, it's a really weird thing to say, but rigid tapping would be really nice on a Datron. Like the amount of holes and threads we put in parts, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's oddly enough one of the reasons it's like, all right, when we were evaluating machines, like, all right, do we just get an ML, which was a solid consideration because we make a lot of large plate.
Is that the
like
bigger
right
Datron?
now,
The cube?
yeah, they make the bigger. The MX cube is the same as the M8. The ML cube is a bigger platform, but like right now we're sending out some plate that's 4 foot square. Where it's like, man, I wish we had a giant gantry to make that. When I heard that was getting sent out, I was like, oh, that sucks. But it is what it is.
Yeah, the Datrons, what always got me, they're really expensive, aren't they? Like
yeah, you're looking at $250,000 to get into any of the larger platforms. The Neos are, I don't know, probably 150 today would be my guess. Yeah. So yeah, they're not a cheap machine.
No,
by any means.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about that from a business perspective of just build something great and charge a lot for it, and I think that's what Datron's doing.
Yeah, and I think it's because they have a high value solution. Like how fast we can set up jobs and run them through is just impressive. Like I wouldn't be surprised
like the vacuum card.
Oh yeah, the vacuum table with that setup that we've put on, and then you've got the aspect of how easy their HMI is where the real gain is. So you've got, you just drag a camera over, you draw a box around what you want to probe, and you probe it. Like there's so many things that just make that user interface so fast.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've always kind of been someone who wanted to use a Datron or wanted to buy a Datron, but it's always been then, but we could buy 2 or 3 hosses for that. And
I get the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the next one that we really want a large gantry would be the next mill that we'd probably get into. What we ran into when we were looking at this, like,
they're
all
expensive.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we have the lowest end Haas gantry mill with kind of the normal options you would get. And, it was just under $300,000.
Yeah, I really want the big Kitamura.
Oh, it's gonna be a lot more.
Oh yeah, we quoted one out in parallel with the Doosan. It was like, all right, because I don't know, plate work is a lot of fun, and that's kind of a parallel that we run because we have so much idle time. We still run plate work for people. It's just because it sits there. So
right.
But we probably only at this point have 2 to 5 jobs at most a year come through that will run out of plate, and they're typically some complex micro machining parts.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the gantry mills too. I would let you know, like if you have that open format, they're messy, right? You don't understand how many chips can get around. I mean, it's essentially like a water jet. It's not as brutal with the maintenance and running cost, but man, like we keep it in the other building with the water jet for a reason.
Yeah, so that's why the Kitamura or that style comes up.
Oh, is it fully enclosed?
They are. Yeah, I've been around those gantries that are not, and you're spot on. It's a nightmare. Like, and then trying to sweep it, like it just sucks.
Yeah. It's and that one, doesn't even have any chip augers. You're manually moving the chips around, but it's kind of the cheapest 5x10 foot machine that you can realistically, machine steel and stainless steel. If you're machining aluminum, especially, it's like the world's best router, right?
Oh yeah.
But with gantry mills, it's if you have the money to spend, you can get something really awesome. But they're definitely a pain.
Yeah, I'd like to save up for like a Kitamura or that style of gantry. Doosan actually has a really nice one they've come out with too. That's kind of that style where it's all sheet metal enclosed. So we'll see how this Doosan experience goes when it arrives in January, and that might skew our decision as well.
This is your first Doosan?
It is, yeah.
Who's your reseller? Is it Ellison or someone else?
It is Ellison, yeah. Yeah, they've been really good to work with too. So, it's not they're not the ones that delayed the machine delivery, but the way they delivered the news was very well appreciated on how they went about it. So yeah, really good experience with them.
Yeah, that's good. New machines always exciting.
Oh yeah. You have anything new on your horizon for machines then?
Well, the newest conveyor is getting built. So
Okay.
we like from Rev 1 to Rev 3, we use the kind of water jet tab and slot with like, 1/2 inch or 3/8 thick aluminum. We actually, backtrack to an old methodology we used to use, which is basically just, water jet one plate and then aluminum extrusion. And then that way you're not piecing it together like normal aluminum extrusion. You're just using tapped holes because it's just a lot more flexible. And that's kind of the thing we realized with the conveyor is that especially with all the machine models we're going after, and if we go from a Rev 4 to a Rev 5, we would like a better platform to do that. That's more flexible,
Okay.
at least in the short term. So
Yeah.
I guess all the machines right now we're kind of building. I'm not really looking to buy anything. We have so much
Yeah.
extra spindle time. I mean, I wish I could use that spindle time somehow, but it's kind of a balance of, I don't want to do the job shop work. It's not as profitable. It's not as great. A lot of the, production parts now we're either outsourcing or, running under our own automation systems. So that, we don't really have a need for a ton of machinists outside of, prototype machinists or setup guys.
Yeah, it's not a good business play for us to chase the exometry jobs or somebody, your local business wants you to run a couple $100 part. We'll lose money doing
Yeah,
it.
and so,
And I'm sure you're in the same boat.
Yeah, you need the contracts and you need AS9100 to really run it, past a business of our existing scale. So it's one of those things. It's pretty easy to take that business from like 1 to 4 people, kind of pre-certs, and then you get into I need certs, I need contracts, and because now you have the real overhead of trying to run a job shop, and that's really where that business gets difficult.
Were you AS9100 certified?
No.
Okay.
No, I was saying if we would have successfully scaled the business, that's the route that is obvious to go, especially with where we're located.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
That was like if I was a good operator in that position at that time in my life, like, if I was just a business genius and not, I think a really good R&D guy, that's what I would have done. I would have, done the AS9100 thing and just, tried to grow with those clients. But at the end of the day, it's just not what I'm good at, right?
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. You brought up, so last week we chatted about conversion rates and leads in the funnel. So I took something I used and modified it a little bit. So if you're open to it, we could run an exercise and see how many leads you need to put in.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
have a little calculator. So, okay, here, I'll pull it up. So it really comes down to, if you're open to sharing some of the things, like what your revenue goals are for next year, what your average deal value is, and then what your conversion rate. If I have those 3 numbers, I can start back calculating what your leads are going to need to be, if you're interested.
Yeah, I'm interested. Honestly, I haven't been monitoring that super closely lately. I've been probably pulled back from marketing a little bit too much. So maybe that's something I can come prepared with next week so I can get you an actual answer rather than just spitballing.
We'll do this just for fun, just for context. So like I've heard like 2 million is kind of that realm you're living in. I'm assuming your average deal value is like 25 grand, somewhere in there.
Well, yeah, and the
Or
thing
am
is
I
we
way
have
high?
the two different businesses, and they're both kind of $1 million a year, right? That's kind of I guess probably like 1.2 and 0.8, right? With automation being slightly smaller right now, and what that ratio is kind of varies month to month.
Okay, so let's just go with the product side, being $1 million and $25,000 order value. Do you have any idea what conversion rate is? 3 to 6% would be my guess.
I have no idea, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just if it's here, we'll go with 5% here. That's a total of 800 leads you're needing to bring into your business on the annual basis.
Yeah, and I think too that probably where we need to continually focus in is on the higher value leads. And that's where I have the least information because like at least at present, I have pretty good information like, oh, we can run a Facebook ad. I can figure out what the exact conversion is from someone who clicked on the ad to ended up purchasing. I can, calculate return on ad spend. And that's what's so nice about running a smaller value product is you can just, money in, money out. And and we really pushed on that lever until the ads stopped working and, Meta's, I think it's just been flooded with bots, honestly.
I think that's just the common theme. Like for product based, like we've talked about stuff I've ran in the past for ads like that for consumer based products. And it's like, it seems like as soon as you figure out that recipe, the game changes and you go back to zero. And it's like this constant loop where it's like feed in, feed in. Oh, I've got it figured out. And you have a couple months of just like, oh, I'm a genius at this point. I'm just printing money. And then it's the rug just gets ripped out
every
from under
time. Yeah. And it has happened with these, quote unquote lower value. And I'm even talking about like our $600 tumble baskets. That's one of those things that, we can sell 50 in a month, and then the next, month we'll sell 2. It's just crazy in terms of what the algorithms decide, what ad they decide they're going to run and who they decide to show it to. And, you have very little visibility. And then, you are kind of like working in this black box, turning knobs in random ways, that you think has a reason, right? And and then you cross your fingers and you find something that works. And then 2 weeks later, it just stops working. Yeah.
Yeah, it is frustrating. PPC is it seems like a spot just to burn cash. That's why we spend so much energy on SEO, but it takes a long time and a lot of investment. So it's like, now if they change the game on that, which they're going to
again, right?
Yeah, with all the AI that's playing, the amount of garbage that people are just kicking out, it's just ridiculous. Like our marketing company just showed us this tool where people are taking their blogs or knowledge bases or content on their website, and you feed it into this AI software where it turns it into 2 people talking about that, and it sounds like a podcast.
Well, yeah, that's
like, it is eerie. Like, okay, this sounds like 2 real people having a conversation like Michael and Matt about how there's these types of industrial robots and which one makes sense for your application. It's like, oh my gosh, it's crazy.
That is kind of terrifying.
Like when they showed that to us, they're like, yeah, we've got some customers doing this. I was like, I no longer trust anything I consume on the internet.
Yeah, that's and as it gets better and better, then we don't even know what's going to happen in terms of how search and SEO and SEM is going to turn.
Yeah. So I guess all we're doing is focusing on the game we can't control, and we're definitely trickling more leads in that way on SEO, which is really encouraging to see.
Yeah, and I think you have a point that hey, it's only 800 leads. We probably should keep pushing on really trying to market and find those lists. And I guess like the means of how we do that has been the question. Obviously there's trade shows, and then I guess my question is like, okay, do we do this in a systematic way of, do we try Zoom Info? Do we try, buying lists? Do we try going and doing something more specific?
I've never bought lists. I've always wanted to have like a conversation with somebody. So, all right, they're going to either come in through our website, we're going to engage with them on LinkedIn, or we're going to meet them face to face at a trade show.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing is that's not really top of funnel, right? So like if they're booking through your website, they're already aware of you. There was already some kind of touch point there. And I guess that's where once people are in our funnel, we don't have a problem closing them. It's getting enough people into the top of the funnel.
See, and I consider website SEO as top of funnel. Like they're going through that process. I think there's just fair. Different going to a trade show is top of funnel. That's cold still. Like now that you've talked to them and you've gotten to them, I might agree that you're moving them a little bit into the middle of funnel. But some people you meet at the trade show, they may appear very warm as a very good lead,
right?
But then you get talking to them later and you're like, oh, I didn't ask this question. You're not the right fit. So yeah, maybe they're in middle of funnel still.
I guess
I still think trade show SEO is still top.
I think probably the answer for top of funnel is kind of in between, because it's like there is, I might Google SMC actuator, right? And I click on the Google ad that says SMC, and then I buy something. And then, if I check out as a guest, that shows up as, a top of funnel new lead that converted, and it, goes into your ROAS calculation. But I was always going to buy that particular SMC actuator, right? Like,
yes.
So I'm really kind of mid funnel, but it looks top of funnel. So I guess we can kind of differentiate it into like if someone's looking for a spindle gripper and they know us and they Google, gimbal spindle gripper, they click on our ad, they buy a gripper. Were they really top of funnel, or were they mid funnel and we didn't know about them? I guess I'm probably getting too far in the weeds, and these are questions that don't matter.
No, that's a good context though. Is it's new existing customers, or have you had engagement with them to be educated? So yeah, you have an interesting point on how that happens, because yeah, we might talk to people at a show. I mean, we have this happen. I can use an example where we met somebody at a trade show almost exactly a year ago. We then saw them come in through an email or through our form right on our website, then hits as an email. And it's like, oh, this is a new lead, local company, really cool. Like, oh no, we met you a year ago at a
Right.
trade show. And it's like, oh, and we go back in our CRM and it's like, we do. It's just for some reason your name was a little bit different, so something was missed. And it's like, gosh, it's
Mhm.
I thought it was a huge win that the website kicked that out, but it's like, yeah, there was some other touch point prior. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good
And I
point.
think this whole conversation is reminding me like I need to be more disciplined and systematic with marketing in general, right?
Mhm.
And in various ways, I think that actually means pulling me out of the seat more aggressively, and also kind of going back to the one book, Dan something, but the idea
Martell.
Martell, yeah, the whole something 80% done by something else is 100% awesome. I got to
Yeah.
learn, okay, give it to the podcast editor, and if it's 80% up to my standards, just ship it, right? To stop being the perfectionist who then doesn't ship enough.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a battle that I think we all fight with and even, we want to hire team members that have that perfectionism or level of detail and quality within them too. So it's really a battle or
Yeah, it's
a
even a balance
balancing
there.
act to
Yeah.
figure out, where do you give? Because otherwise that's just a slippery slope where it's like, this is 80% up to my standard. And then it's like, oh, this is 80% up to my standard. Now we're 80% of 80%. Like, geez, when are we going to stop this?
Yeah. And I keep coming back to this, and I think it's because I'm, there's some things you have to really be taught and learn about yourself. And I do think, at least from my conversations with you, I think you're a better manager and like a better delegator than I am. And
I don't know about that. You're
well,
probably hard on yourself.
I'm incredibly hard on myself. So, but one of the things that can be difficult for me is like before like the initial stage of doing something new is always hard, because what you want as the outcome. Like I know I want to create the podcast, right? But then I'm editing the first podcast, and I actually tried to hire this podcast editor, and then they didn't really know what I wanted, and I didn't even really know what I wanted. And then I edited it after I got frustrated with this podcast editor, and I kind of just ghosted the Upworker. And then from there, I kind of got a system of here's what I think I want. But when you try to delegate something that you're not necessarily good at too early, it's difficult to do because you don't even know what you want, and then you're not getting the outcome that you desire, and you can just get into this kind of downward spiral.
I can completely agree with that or relate to that, because definitely been in that where it's like, oh, this is what I expected, but it was my fault that I didn't communicate those expectations right. And it's like in the moment you're so frustrated, like, why didn't you just know this? And it's like, just calm down, Matt. Like this was your fault that you didn't set some expectations or clearly describe something.
Well, what's hard is it might not be,
they'd reach
right?
this.
And that's the thing is like, when you work with someone, you can always tell when someone's amazing or great, like when Matt Blackwell, who's written a lot of our macros recently, like he's just incredible. Like you just hand him the project, he just figures it out, gets it done, thinks of things you wouldn't have thought of. What's hard is when you have someone who is, between mediocre and good. It can be a garbage in, garbage out, because someone who's great will just tell you this is garbage, I can't work with this, right? But someone who's kind of middle of the road, or you're outsourcing to, or you're one of their clients, and you're not a major overall percentage of their revenue, where you're not getting a ton of attention. It's difficult to differentiate sometimes between someone who is mediocre or bad at what they're doing and kind of masking it, and someone who is good at what they're doing and doesn't have great inputs.
But that could sometimes be that you just didn't pick the right person to do the tasks.
Right. Yeah. No,
Because I definitely hear you on the point where like, there's been times where I didn't know exactly what I wanted. And so I kind of gave the high level zoomed out scope, and the team members come back with something that's like, holy crap, this is way better than anything I anticipated.
Yeah.
Like, and so you get both sides of that coin. So it's like, all right, it's just worth the risk because there's these times where it comes back so much better than I anticipated. Like, don't even know how you
Right.
got to that solution, but awesome. And then there's the times where it's like, okay, there's clearly missing the mark here. And it's like, all right, let's just do it again.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the internal team, and I think I probably see this more as a problem with like outside vendors, or the people you're paying as consultants who are doing kind of more work and fits and starts, and you maybe don't have as built out of a relationship with.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of a staple of our vertical integration or our single source guarantees. It's like, that's been a huge portion of how we've grown our business is how do we become as self-reliant as possible? Because those are the pains I saw everywhere else I worked was like, we'd send stuff out for, this was our contractor for X, this is our contractor for Y.
Right.
And then at the end of the day, I felt like I was just managing all these contractors that were missing expectations. And it was like, that's how we ended up vertically integrating at Ring Brothers got very frustrated in a meeting where a supplier was raising rates, missing deadlines. And it was like, why are they still our supplier?
Yeah.
And like after that meeting, we never purchased from them again. And we brought all of our SKUs in house. Like, but that's not always the best breakdown. Maybe I'm just saying that Matt's a control freak on something.
No, and to be fair, we've done the same thing. We've insourced a ton of different stuff. We've really have minimized the number of contractors and outside people and made it mostly internal staff. And I guess that's kind of where those are the places I still struggle, where it doesn't justify having an outside person, but I shouldn't be doing it. What people on my team shouldn't be doing it, but it still needs to get done, right?
Yeah, I can think of a couple things that are definitely some pain points. The one is frames always for us. So we don't weld any of our big frames. We typically have all our extruded aluminum cut to length. And I swear those things drive our lead times or make us miss deadlines on what we want to deliver to our end customer more times than I'd like to count. And it's like, all right, you've delivered on XYZ. How does it continue to miss? Even we bake into the timeline that, all right, this is going to take 12 weeks and it still misses the mark. It's like,
is that something you can just swap vendors easily? Is it something that's super difficult?
We've swapped vendors, we've swapped different materials, and it's like it seems like every single time it comes back to that same like 12 weeks plus, and it's like, why isn't this a month? Like that's what it seems like it should be.
And one thing that's hard too is there's certain industries that, and being a job shop, especially a small one without certs, can definitely fall in this with if you don't have a specific niche, where the way to run a business is actually like, and quote unquote succeed, is to kind of run it as like, if the margins are tight enough, then you'll get this thing where the incentives aren't there, and you get people in their garage running parts, and the customer service and shipping on time, and all these things fall by the wayside. And it turns out the way that people are succeeding is by pushing out timelines and playing games with their customers in ways that suck. And then you have industries like like trucking is one that comes to trying to LTL something is a nightmare. And and I'm wondering if it's something like that, Matt, where you have all of the vendors who are still around, they all kind of suck in the same way because that's the way that the business succeeds, and that's the survivorship bias.
It could be. So yeah, we've quoted out to several different suppliers, same pains, if they even quote it back sometimes.
Right.
Is the other thing.
So that might be one of the last thing you insource. I mean, how hard is it to cut those things down and weld it? Is it like extrusion, or is it getting welded together?
So steel is welded together.
Okay,
I mean, we have a TIG welder in house. I mean, we've done like some of our weldments. It's just one of those where we like a really clean shop. I really just don't want grinding and welding on the MIG level in here or that level of welding. I'm fine if, all right, we've got to weld these couple pieces of sheet metal together. Awesome. Let's do that. Order it from Sen, Laser Bros. We'll bend it here, weld it, but full frame assemblies.
Have you considered laser welding?
Have not. It's more like structural welding.
I know. Yeah.
Like we're talking like thick 1/4-inch plate.
Yeah.
Tubing, and then like inch thick plate on the top.
Okay.
Like
yeah. You're not going to laser weld that, but
yeah. So it's a lot of bigger assemblies. Like that's a robot frame is the most recent one that we're
Right.
battling to get. It's we actually just got the PO out today. It was $2,500 assembly, but it's inch thick plate on top and a couple tube steel plates and then plate on the bottom for bolting to concrete.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's when you have the dirt, like we have the two shops because of that problem, right? Where we have, water jet and the gantry mill and powder coat and sandblasting and bead blasting. And it's just like all the junk you don't want to be around the machines. And then, we have the kind of, it's halfway between a production prototype shop and a little showroom where, all the R&D is getting done, all the clean stuff is happening. I almost wonder, I don't know how much of a constraint like space is, but whether it's a partition or a room or something, that might be the final.
yeah, we're busting at the seams. Like I have no room to put that in.
You own the building, right?
We do. So
Yeah.
we're looking at an addition on the back of it. It's just timing of that and when you bite it off, because it's going to be, it's probably going to be a $2 million expansion onto the plant at this point. And so we just bought the building, 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
to be thinking about that.
I think it's one of those things like they say there's never a good time to have kids or get married. Like you can look for the perfect time. But I think it's one of those things you keep putting it off. It's just the problem's going to get worse, and that could then cap your growth.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I got a sign right here that everybody that comes into our building, it's Henry Ford's line of, if you need a machine and don't buy it, you'll find out that you'll have paid for it and don't own it. I think that's, that's one of those where
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's just, for us, it's coming down to timing of when we deploy that building in. But I hadn't thought of doing structural welding internally. Maybe it's, yeah.
It comes down to how much do you do too, because that's where we end up in the difficult spot. So when we need something twice a month, well, we're not going to hire a person to do that thing twice a month, and especially if it's a specialized skill like structural welding. Can you even create the work orders and maintain them and keep that person doing something productive?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And as we're looking out, I mean, we've got one project that's the one I was reviewing right before we came on here. There's probably going to be like 125,000 just in weldments on that thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you could justify having a welder for that job.
Yeah, but for that period, right? And then,
Yeah.
but do you have the same throughput of weldments overall? That's the hard part.
No.
Yeah.
That's exactly. I mean, to date, we've probably spent 10 grand on weldments in all of Develop's history, if that.
Right.
So it's a low number.
Yeah, so you're stuck is how it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's where it's difficult. Yeah, the vendor management and OSPs, and sometimes like there's not a great answer.
So, well, it seems like that's pretty close to a wrap. I think
Cool.
we kind of
Yeah.
hit an hour here. So
Sweet. Well, I will talk to you next week, Matt. Thank you so much for listening to Matt and I's conversation this week on the Manufacturing Automation Podcast. If you like the podcast, please share it with a friend or give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We'll be back next week to continue sharing our respective journeys in life, business, and industrial automation. Thanks so much.